Welcome to the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast. Tune in every Thursday as we share inspirational stories from the world's greatest creators, entrepreneurs, and go-getters about how they've turned life's lemons into lemonade. And now, here's your host of Lemonade Stand Stories, Charan Prabhakar.
Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Charan Prabhakar with the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast, and I'm here with my good buddy Jordan Ross, who I had the privilege of meeting just in November, actually. You know, it wasn't that long ago, but we've become fast friends, and we got to work on a really, really wonderful project together called The Chosen. Jordan's a regular on that on that show, and I happened to just be there for that one day, and he made me just feel so welcome. I remember kind of going there and being like, all right, this is a cool set. I was in Utah filming, and I live in Utah, so it all kind of made sense, and it was comfortable that way. And I knew a lot of the crew, but the cast I definitely didn't know, and I didn't know what the experience was going to be. And I remember, I think Jordan, he was like one of the first people I talked to on set while I was getting my makeup done, and he was getting his makeup done. And I don't know, he just made me feel so welcome, like I was a part of the clan, you know. And I loved it because every set, every show has its own energy, and you just don't know where you fall, you know. So I appreciate that, Jordan. So thanks so much for being on this podcast that I've been doing for a little bit. And yeah, happy to have you here, man.
Of course. And I mean, you fit right in right away. And I had we talked about a little before the podcast, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but having spent time in LA, and, I've been pursuing this. I've been acting since I was 6 and pursuing it since as a career since I was around probably 10 or 12 or something. So I've been on my share of sets as like a guest star or a featured extra or a stand-in or whatever. And it's like, whenever you're the new guy, that's like everyone else, it's like you're going to a new school where everyone already knows each other. So I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong, or to feel like you're the odd man out or whatever. And it's like, I always try to make an effort to make anyone that comes onto the set feel welcome, because that means a lot to me when others have done that for me.
That is awesome, man. I remember particularly there was this, I was on a show called Silicon Valley. It's a show on HBO. And when I did the show, I did the first episode, the pilot episode. I remember like the cast, they were really nice and stuff, but definitely I felt like they were there and I was here, you know, like I was a part of the green room so I could hang out with them, but like they were kind of doing their own thing. But there was one or two that were like really friendly and really open and welcoming. But what was funny, and I didn't even realize this, was after I performed, after I did my scene, suddenly I was like a part of their clan. It was almost like me performing was like a rite of passage, and all of a sudden they're like, dude, like you did amazing. And all of a sudden, like they were like welcoming me. And then season 2, I was back on that show, and they were like, it was almost like I was a part of their family, you know?
Yeah.
But I didn't feel that with The Chosen. I felt like I didn't have to perform to be welcome, you know?
Yeah.
And just being there. So I really appreciated that experience.
Of course.
So no, that's awesome. Now, you said you started acting as a career when you were just a kid, right? Like 11 or 12, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. I'd love to hear how you decided, hey, this is what I want to do with my life.
For sure. So where to start? Okay, so my mom, whenever I'm going way back. So when my mom was born, her birth parents, they were living in California. They were, a young boyfriend and girlfriend. They split up. Not long after they split up, my grandma, my mom's birth mom, found out that she was pregnant. And rather than telling her ex-boyfriend and making it awkward, she had my mom and put her up for adoption. And my mom was adopted by a couple in Arlington, Texas, my other grandparents. And they raised my mom. She grew up knowing she was adopted, but never knowing anything about her birth parents. Years later, when she was 25, she had me. I have all sorts of medical issues, scoliosis, cerebral palsy, severe asthma, all this stuff. So she wanted to see if any of it ran in the family, and if there was anything else she needed to look out for. So she tracked down a private investigator to find out who her birth parents are. And it turned out that her dad, who still had no idea that he had a 25-year-old daughter and a grandson out there. Her dad was Barry Corbin, the actor from Northern Exposure, Lonesome Dove, Urban Cowboy, um, a ton of other things. So No
Wow.
Country for Old Men. And so she tracked him down, and he actually moved back from California to Fort Worth because my mom and dad were going through a separation whenever I was really young. And he was like, you know what? I didn't get to spend the first 25 years with you. I'm moving to Texas, because he was originally from Texas as well. He said,
Wow.
I'll move back to Texas. I'll fly to LA when I need to shoot something, but I'll fly down there. You and the kids come live with me, and we'll get to make up for lost time. So we did.
No
Um,
way.
yeah. So so I technically have like 3 sets of grandparents now.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and my grandpa, I grew up going on film sets with him, seeing people come up and recognize him, and that was just kind of commonplace. It was just, the norm. But I never thought much. I loved watching movies with him, and also my other grandpa, the one that adopted my mom. They're both the reasons. Those 2 grandpas are the reasons that I love movies. And we'd watch old westerns and stuff together. And whenever I was 6, I was super shy. I would only really talk to my immediate family, no one else. And we went to a audition with some family friends for a community theater production of A Christmas Carol. And I got up on stage when my mom went to the restroom. We were just waiting for them to audition, and we were going to go eat afterwards.
Yeah.
But she came out, and I was up on stage singing Silent Night. And she was like, she broke down, because I would
Wow.
not talk to anyone. But for whatever reason, I was like, I got to get on that stage.
That's
And
so
I did.
interesting. That's so amazing
Yeah.
that like you're able to like come alive when you were on stage.
Right. And I was still
Wow.
shy off stage, but for whatever
Right.
reason, I loved being on stage. And from 6 to probably 14, I did 40 to 50 professional productions. Um, and somewhere in between there, when I was probably, I think I was 7 or 8 when I did my first TV. I was like an orphan on Walker, Texas Ranger.
Oh
And
man.
then
Nice.
I did like a little episode of Barney, which they used to shoot out in Las Colinas. And then uh, whenever I did a pilot, and then I did a short film actually with my grandpa in Austin. And after I did both of those were more, I actually had stuff to do in both of those. I
Mm.
had some lines, and I got to kind of experience what it's like to be on a film set, to be acting. And from then on, I was like, yeah, there's nothing else for me.
Yes,
This is
this
it.
is it.
So yeah. Um, and
Dude,
then
I love
yeah.
this. Well, so were you just there the whole time in Texas, or when did you say, "Hey, I want to move over to LA"?
LA. Yeah. So I went to LA. It basically, I was kind of in and out. Like, I went to a couple private schools, and then I'd homeschool for a little bit, like if
Mm.
acting stuff got busy. And then in ninth grade, I decided to, and yeah, in ninth grade, I ended up going to my first public school, and it was way different than anything I had experienced.
Sure.
And I, again, kind of like we had discussed, going on to a new a set where you're not a regular, you feel like the new kid in school. I
Yeah.
literally was the new kid in school. And these other kids had gone through elementary school and middle school together, and then I show up, and
Yeah.
I'm this like, weird kid that wears Hawaiian shirts that are way too big. And like,
Yeah.
I had, as someone who has a disability, I have a limp, and it's something that it's not so severe that it's like taboo to make fun of me, but it's just different enough. So bullies kind of felt like they had a free pass. They're like, okay, cool. This
Wow.
kid
Okay.
isn't he's all, he's not mentally disabled or anything, and he's, not in a wheelchair, so I guess he's fair game. So it was kind of like um a weird middle ground where they felt like it was okay to cross that line.
Wow.
And yeah, it was strange, because like I had never, going to private schools and like be with the same kids my whole life before that, It was smaller, more intimate. All the kids knew me for years, so none of them thought anything of my limp. But
They accepted as you, and it was
yeah,
awesome, right?
yeah. And then at this new school, I was like, it was my first time experiencing people, because I never even thought of it. But then I started thinking about it when other people started pointing it
Wow.
out. It was rough. Like I'd eat lunch between the vending machines so I could see the bullies coming and like be
Oh my
hidden.
gosh.
And it was brutal. So I ended up talking to at first I lied to my mom and I was like, oh yeah, I have all these friends, because I didn't want her to be worried.
Mm.
And eventually I was like, yeah, I can't keep going there. I just want to act. That's all I want to do. I just want to focus on that. So I had already spent the previous summer in LA for a summer like acting boot camp at
Hmm.
this acting school for kids and teens. And they it was run by a woman named Donna Jean Goheen, and she's also a manager. Um, and I was like, I just want to go out there and do that, and sign with her and go audition for things and take classes. So my mom was like, okay. So we homeschooled that summer right after ninth grade, and I basically fast tracked high school. We did this homeschool program where I just kind of went through it as fast as I could, and within the next year I had finished 10th through 12th grade.
Nice.
And I moved to LA, and I was out there most of the time from about 14 up to 18. And then I came back to Dallas to go to KD Conservatory, the acting school. And I got my associates there in 15 months. And then I went back to LA for about 3 years, full time. And then, yeah, it was LA. Sorry if I'm rambling, by the way.
No, keep going. This is
If you have
great.
another question, like cut me
You don't
off.
worry. We're
Okay,
gonna
so
unpack some stuff, but don't worry. Keep going. This is
okay,
great.
cool. So LA, I really liked it. I made some good friends. I had done a feature right after graduating college, with it was this tiny town in Texas. It was a really low budget movie called Beyond the Farthest Star, and I did that, and I made some really good friends, a couple of which lived in LA. I had all of my friends from the acting school out there, so I felt comfortable moving out there.
Yeah.
But then I quickly realized, even when I'd see my friends, like, you have fun then, but for such a busy place, it can be very lonely.
Oh yeah.
Um,
100%.
as you know, yeah, it's
Yeah.
you feel very isolated. You feel, and I've talked about this a lot with my castmates on The Chosen, but you feel it's easy to feel like you're just kind of lost in the shuffle, or like that people don't really care. It's
Yeah.
all about like, oh, what project are you working on, and trying
Yes.
to figure out like how you can get involved with other people's projects. And
Yeah.
it's like everyone's always hustling, which I get, that's part of it, but there's not a lot of substance. And
No, and it's like relationships are kind of thrown in the back burner a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
Instead of like just, hey, how you doing? Because you really care to know how someone's doing. It's more of a,
right,
hey, how you doing? But really what I want to know is like, what are you working on and how can I be involved in it? And it's like,
yeah,
it's a little cutthroat and stuff like that.
yeah,
I remember my experience there. I mean, don't get me wrong, I had a wonderful experience in LA, but because I had great friends. And
yeah,
that is my one thing I always tell people is like, look, before you go to LA to get into acting and all that stuff, go there and make some really solid, good friends.
hmm,
People that are probably not even involved in the industry. Like, go
yeah,
make friends with them and like have like a base where you can like find like a sense of normalcy, a sense of reality, because LA will just eat you alive. you
yeah.
know?
It's
Uh,
I heard, I can't remember who was it. Damian Lillard. I was listening to a podcast with him,
mhm.
and he said that it was I wrote it down because I loved it so much. He was talking about he teaches acting sometimes, and he'll tell his students that pursuing a career in acting, i.e. going to LA, it's kind of like being a gazelle trying to cross the Sahara Desert.
Okay.
And if you're doing it alone, you're probably going to die of thirst, or you're going to get eaten by a lion, or you're going to get lost and just wander forever. Like the odds of you making it all the way across that desert alone are slim to none. But if you can find a pack of other gazelles to travel with and to be with throughout the process, then you can look out for one another, you can protect one another, and the odds of all of you making it to the end of the desert are much higher.
Oh, I
And
like that.
you saying that having like a group of close friends is key. And I think now I've actually been talking to my wife about possibly, if things keep going well with The Chosen and other opportunities come up, going back out to California for a little
Mm.
while. And before it was the same type of thing where we weren't sure if we wanted to live there. And ultimately, I do think I want to be in Texas long term, but uh to just kind of keep the momentum going,
Yep.
now that I have a true group of friends from The Chosen, most of which live in LA.
Yep.
um it's like for the first time I would have that big support group, that big family out there.
Yeah.
And I think that would make a big difference. But
I love that, man. I mean, it's interesting. Before I moved to LA, because I moved to LA in 2008,
mhm,
or 2009, excuse me. But 2008, the end of that year, I did a feature film, and the rest of the cast were all LA based. And they were like, dude, you got to come to LA, like come and we'll help you. And I think that was the encouragement I needed to go there.
yeah.
And even still, um, yeah, I was kind of lonely, it was just like, man, what do I do? I've been fortunate in that I was shy growing up too, but I kind of grew out of that and I started learning to just network and make friends and all that stuff. And that really helped a ton.
Right.
But yeah, I think like the biggest thing I learned was, hey, have like a good set, like a good set of relationships that you can like rely on and like just go hang out with and play with. And so like a bunch of my friends, we'd always go to like the beach, we'd always go do these things, just like normal things that we could do to like keep ourselves sane.
Yeah.
And I found that for me, my success in LA actually came as a result of my emotional well-being already, if that makes
hmm
sense.
Yeah.
Where I wasn't in it like with the scarcity mentality. I wasn't like trying to chase all these projects down and stuff. I just felt good with where I was and I was just happy already. And as a result of it, especially the latter part of my time in LA, like a lot of TV shows came in my life, and I think it was just like this feeling of like, yeah, I just felt good. I just felt good being there, and everything kind of flowed nicely.
hmm
So yeah, it's very interesting to see like how things had changed. And so for me, my reason for moving LA out of LA wasn't because projects weren't coming through. It was just I just wanted to create my own stuff, and
Right.
it was easier to create stuff outside of LA, like in Utah. So
hmm
that's where I moved. But I wanted to kind of, before we get into The Chosen, I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of unpack something with you a little bit, because I feel like this definitely, like, I don't know, like this struck a chord with me. Um, you said growing up, going to school, you
hmm
never felt different. You felt like accepted and loved in your private school. But then when you went to the public school and people started pointing out some of your, I guess, like minor disabilities or whatnot, your
Yeah.
health,
Yeah.
yeah, just different things, it kind of caused a shame in you, right?
hmm
So much
Yeah.
so that like you hid like behind like vending machines or whatever it was, so that you
Yeah.
wouldn't have to like see the bullies come and everything. Um, how did that impact just your own confidence, and how did you overcome that sense of shame? Because I feel like a lot of kids nowadays struggle with shame in different forms,
Yeah.
and some of them are physical, you can see them, but a lot of them aren't, and they
Yeah.
try to hide it, right? Especially if it's emotional pain or
hmm
emotional impairment, people try hiding it. So yeah, what did you do to kind of overcome those challenges?
It was it's still a journey. There's a lot that part of it was at the time, like I had the most supportive mom in the world, and she uh I could talk to her about anything, and she's the type of person that would if I told her today, like, hey, I don't want to act anymore, I want to be an astronaut, she'd be like, okay, cool. Let me look up astronaut schools and let me like do
Yeah.
everything I can to help you. Like she's the most supportive person. So having
Mm.
that definitely helped keep a little bit of confidence in myself, even throughout all of that. But the thing that was really difficult was going to LA, after experiencing that, then going there and I booked some things here or there, and I was a part of some cool projects, but um there was a lot of dry spells, and there were several instances where casting directors, and it is getting better, Hollywood and the industry in general, at being inclusive, whether it's gender, race, disabilities, whatever it is. They are becoming more inclusive, which is great. But at the time, it was still something, even just 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever, like it's been improving, but it was a lot worse then. And there were several times like casting directors would comment on, one was like, hey, can you lose the limp? And then another
No
one,
way.
yeah, and another
Oh
one
man.
asked if it was a character choice, like, yeah, I'm not sure how I felt about the limp, can we try to get like they thought that I was just doing that as part of the character.
Yeah.
And I After that, then I booked a national commercial. I went through several rounds of auditions. I got it. I went and did the fitting. And while I was doing the fitting, the director came over, and it was a commercial that was supposed to air during the Olympics. It was like a big one. And this director came over and he noticed me walking, because normally I have a lift in my shoe, so it's not as noticeable,
Sure.
because it's just one leg is longer than the other, basically. But at the fitting, I was trying on all sorts of clothes. I had my shoes off and I was walking, and he noticed. So he came over and was like, hey, are you okay? Did you get hurt? And I explained it to him. And he said, or he asked me if I would be able to do the what the commercial required. And the commercial was someone playing like a VR basketball game. So it's me just
Mhm.
like acting like I'm playing basketball with a VR headset on.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I did it in all 3 rounds of auditions. Like, you were there, you
Yeah.
saw me. And he was like, okay, I just wanted to make sure. But he looked really concerned. And I showed up on
Okay.
set, and I saw one of the other actors that was at the audition for that character wearing the
Huh.
same costume I was wearing, and they had him there as a backup in case my limp was too noticeable. And in the end,
Wow.
they just cut that part of the commercial out altogether. So
Huh.
there was a lot of moments that it was kind of like, it was frustrating, because I knew it's like, okay, I'm booking things, I'm getting good feedback, but the one hang up is this limp, is this thing that makes me different. And it's
Mhm.
like, that was discouraging, because I felt, if I was just like a bad actor, or I wasn't getting the
Sure.
material or whatever, I can work on that. I can get better. But this was something, it's like, I can only do so much. I can't
Right.
change that. It's like, just like you can't change your skin color or whatever. It's
Yeah,
like,
I was literally gonna say that for me, and like being
right.
Indian actor, it's like I'm limited to certain types of
Yeah.
roles.
They're like,
So yeah.
do we need an Indian for this character? Or
Yeah.
like, it's like it's but the thing that's frustrating is when it's something totally out of your control, you can't do anything about it. And that sucked, and it hurt, because I would then, in auditions, I was no longer thinking about the material or the character, or trying to do it justice. I was thinking more about, okay, cover up the limp, cover up the limp.
Oh
And I
man.
would see that there's so many times I'd be doing it, and as I'd be walking out, or when I would walk in, that was even worse. I would notice the casting director's eyes glance down and see it. And maybe some of
Oh,
them didn't. Maybe it was me
yeah.
overthinking it, but I would notice, on a several occasions, where I would notice them notice it, and that
Mm.
just threw me. And I bombed so many auditions because of that. And then I think long story short, being in LA, going through that, struggling, I ended up coming back home to get a hip surgery. And it wasn't for the limp. I was just, I had some issues with that because of the cerebral palsy. And, um, I moved back home after that. I ended up getting married shortly after, and I was like, well, let's just stay in Texas. And then it was several years of because I recovered from the hip surgery, which took a while, and I hadn't acted in a couple of years at that point, and that was really rough because that's when I'm truly like
Alive.
happiest.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I started doing like, this gunfight comedy Wild West show at Six Flags and doing little things like that, just trying to get back into it. And it was kind
Sure.
of like, itching that scratch for me, or scratching that itch, whatever it is,
Sure.
scratching that
Whatever.
itch.
Yeah.
And I did, so I was doing that kind of stuff, but I was still like, there was still times where it's like, oh yeah, I would hear back from other people like that I didn't get a role because of the limp and things like that. And it was still just kind of there in the back of my head. And finally, you asked how I overcame it. I still am like, there's still a level of shame, which now I can acknowledge. Before I couldn't even identify the shame. I just felt bad and I couldn't put a finger on why, or like what was causing it and all of that.
Yeah.
Now I acknowledge it. So if shame comes up, I can silence it, and I know how to deal with it a little better now. But it was booking The Chosen, honestly, was what and I've told Dallas this, who was on your podcast. It was a great
Yeah.
episode, by the way.
Yeah.
But I told Dallas this, that like booking that and then meeting that group of people, and being part of that cast is has done more for my confidence than anything. Like
Mm.
I and it's actually funny because I booked that. I did 2 rounds of auditions. The second one, Dallas was there. And then I waited a week or so. I got
Now,
the
did it
call.
come through Texas? Was it like,
Yeah.
because I think Beverly was casting that, I believe,
Yes. Yeah.
So it came through Texas.
It did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually the only local hire that got a series regular part on it, and it was I actually, at the time, the school I went to in Dallas, where I graduated from, I went back there after my hip surgery and after I did like the Wild West shows and stuff. I was like, okay, I'm not paying the bills. Is like this isn't that much money.
Mhm.
I had one kid. Now I have three. But I was like, we have a kid. I got to have some sort of consistent income, but I want to stay in the arts. So I went back to that school. I started teaching some kids classes, and then I was an admissions rep there. And the funny thing is, at that school, they casting directors will rent out studio space there to hold auditions, mostly for commercials and stuff like that. But
Sure.
I was scheduled to do a few interviews that day for potential students of the and like tours of the school. And I got a notification from my agent that I had an audition coming up that day.
Mhm.
And I saw that it was right between two of my interviews. And I was like, I don't know if I can make this audition. I may have to like cancel it. And I hadn't booked anything. Like I hadn't done anything on film or television since, oh man, probably 2014. And
Okay. So it's been a minute.
yeah, maybe 2014, 2015, but it had been a while. It had been at least 3 years, 4 years. I'd done some theater, little things here, like a tiny little commercial, stuff like that. But it had been a while. So I was kind of discouraged anyway. It's like, okay, fine, I'll just cancel it. I'm not going to book it anyway. And then I looked at the location. I was like, well, maybe it's nearby, because a lot of them are nearby in Dallas. So maybe it's close. And I looked, and it was in our building, right down, literally
No
a,
way.
a 30-second walk from my desk. And I was like,
No
oh,
way.
okay, yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, I'll do it. So I did the audition. I did the callback like a week later, and then I found out I booked it a week after that.
Mm.
And I was on set the first day, and Dallas, because I was wearing my lift in my shoe for the auditions, and I get on set and I have to wear these, ancient looking flip flops. And so I can't wear a lift. So I'm there and I'm walking out of my trailer and Dallas comes up and gives me a hug. He's like, "Hey man, welcome. We're glad to have you." And saw him kind of stop and look, and he was like, "Are you okay, by the way?" And I was like, "Oh, here we go.
Here we
He's
go.
he's gonna
Yeah.
recast me. He's gonna do like he's gonna make my role smaller." Like I was bracing for it, and I explained it to him, and he was like, "Oh, okay." And then we finished those first 4 episodes. I only worked 4 days on that. And then he was like, you're going to be back a lot more for the next 4. And I was like, okay, cool. So the next 4 came around, and he came up to me one day early on, like in that first week, and was like, "Hey, so we're starting to plan the future seasons." Because they had already had, for the most part, the first like season written. And he came up and was like, "We're planning out the future seasons. Would you be okay with me incorporating your disability into the character and making that, part of little James?" Um, and I said, "Yeah," but part of me was kind of worried about it because it's something I've spent my whole life trying to hide. And
Wow.
now
Yeah.
it's like, "Oh, so you're going to draw attention to the thing I'm most insecure about in front of hundreds of millions of people?" Like, because we just crossed, I think, 117 million views. So it's like,
Yeah, it's insane.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, now all these people are going to be looking directly at the thing I'm most insecure about. So, part of me was nervous, but then the more I thought about it, I was like, no, I need to do this because of the other kids and other people that have similar insecurities, whether it's a physical one or not. I need to do this to show, like, you can accomplish your dreams. You can make it, in spite of your insecurities or your disabilities or the things that maybe other people might judge you by or whatever. Like there are, you can overcome those things and still accomplish what you can still accomplish your dreams and what you set your heart to. And I needed to do it for that because I've always wanted to help other people that struggle with that. But I also needed to do it for myself because essentially little James is, I don't know if you saw the most recent episode 3 of season 2 yet. It just was released
I didn't
last
even
night.
know episode 2 came out.
Yeah,
I need to watch both of those.
Yeah, 2 came out last night, and then Dallas was like, "And surprise, here's episode 3," and then they released it. So, but in episode 3, I won't give any major spoilers, but I do have a scene where I'm talking with another one of the apostles, and he's basically asking me, "Why hasn't Jesus healed you? Is it hard for you to watch him heal all these other people and he hasn't healed you yet?" And I'm kind of like, "Yeah, it sucks. Like, I don't know." I'm afraid to bring it up though, because I don't want him to feel different about me. I'm afraid of, like, what he's going to say if I ask him to heal me. So it's like this dilemma, this struggle. But I love that they're showing little James's shame. They're showing the thing that he's insecure about, and that he, it's kind of like that feeling of like, why me? Why did I have to be the one that's different? And I think that Dallas has said this, and he mentioned this in an interview, that he was like, someone asked about little James, like, "Oh, is little James going to be healed eventually?" And Dallas was like, "Well, in order for little James to be healed, the actor playing little James would also have to be healed." And he was like, "And I believe in miracles, but odds are that's not going to happen. So odds are little James won't be getting healed either," which and if that's the case, it's like, how do we justify one of Jesus's apostles having a physical disability that isn't healed? And to me, the justification that we came up with is, not everyone needs healing, and that you can use your disabilities and your differences to inspire others and to help others, and it can become a strength. And that's one of the biggest reasons I'm excited about this journey with little James, and to see where it goes, because I will be going through the exact same journey as he is, and trying to come to terms with all the same things that little James is coming to terms with. So, yeah.
Wow. Have people given like feedback on episode 3? Have they?
Yeah.
How has it been received?
It's been so episode 3 is a very unique episode. Though there's a tracking shot, a one shot that's 15 minutes long, that features like 12, I think, speaking roles in the scene. So technically it's amazing. And then narratively there's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of you get to kind of see how all these disciples personalities mesh. But yeah, so the feedback that I personally have gotten has been awesome. The fans, I've had several fans, like a mother of a daughter with cerebral palsy reached out and said how much that meant to her, feeling like she said she could picture her daughter in that seat saying that exact same thing.
Mm.
I've had a lot of people. I actually was contacted recently by an administrator for a support group on Facebook for young girls with scoliosis and their parents. And they asked, like, hey, would you be willing, because a lot of them are fans of the show, would you be willing to write just like a little encouraging post on there and just give them a little bit of inspiration and encouragement? And I was like, yeah. So I wrote out a thing kind of talking about what we've been talking about. And I got dozens and dozens of comments and messages from parents and young girls saying things like, I'm bullied a lot, so you sharing that really meant a lot. Thank you so much. And other parents saying that, they worry about their kids getting like one of them has a surgery coming up in a week, and it's the same spinal fusion that I had. And they were like, thank you for sharing your story. And it was just really, really amazing being able to share my story with these other people that are going through the same thing. And that's kind of the reason I don't care about, I'm not saying I'm famous at all, but I don't care about getting famous or being a recognizable person, other than the fact that it then gives you a platform to try to reach other people. So a big thing now, I'm feeling very driven recently to start getting involved with organizations, whether it's involving scoliosis, cerebral palsy, or any other physical disability, but also getting involved with like anti-bullying campaigns. And I'm going to reach out to my old high school to see if I could go there and talk to some kids one day, like just to kind of the anti-bullying and talking to kids with disabilities. Both of those things are super important to me. And I'm going to try to use this platform that The Chosen is starting to give me to try to do that. So yeah.
Dude. Okay. Like, honestly, there is so much I can discuss with you regarding that topic.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of parts of my life that I'm focusing on doing that. And as you know, there's a show that I'm creating on Angel Studios, which is what Chosen's on, called Let's Get Epic. And the whole idea behind that show is helping kids realize that they've got power within themselves and that they can face challenges with confidence. Because a lot of times they're facing cyberbullying, depression, all kinds of stuff. A friend of mine last year, this was actually right before I did that episode of The Chosen. He was he created an organization called Save the Kids, and he would go and speak to schools everywhere about like the dangers of social media and about like the dangers of cyberbullying and all this stuff. And unfortunately, he passed away. He had like a heart attack. He passed away.
Oh, no.
So his organization is still being carried forth. So we can definitely talk more about that if that's a mission of yours, because I feel like I've got a lot of connections in that world, and I would love to like help you to go and speak. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I would love that.
Dude, honestly though, like it's your story to me is so inspiring. Do you know an actor by the name of RJ Mitty? Do you know who that is?
Okay, so this is a funny story.
Yeah.
Are you friends with RJ? Or
I am. I actually acted with RJ in a show.
So I was. This is really funny.
Yeah.
I was runner-up for Walter Jr. and so it was. I was in California, and there was I was so bitter for a long time
Sure.
because the big hang up on for me was every other thing I had ever auditioned for, it's like the limp is too noticeable.
Yeah.
Then I auditioned for Breaking Bad, and Sharon Bialy and Sherry Thomas, the casting directors, send in my tape. At the time, they still had to like put it on a DVD and send it
Yeah.
to be viewed. And they sent it, and they wanted actors that actually have cerebral palsy. So I went in, and they said, do it as yourself. Don't try to ham it up or make it look like it's more severe than it is. However severe your CP is, that's how we want you to do it. So I went in and I did the scene just like this, and they sent it in, and Vince Gilligan was like, I can't tell that he has cerebral palsy. And it's like, oh man, like for once my disability is like not severe enough. So then
Oh man.
Sherry Thomas called me and was like, hey, can you come back and get some forearm crutches and work on slurring your speech? She was like, I know they don't want people to play it up or anything, but
Mhm.
she was like, they loved your audition, it just wasn't as severe as it needed to be. So I'm going to have you come in and do this again. So on her off day, she brought me back in and worked with me for a long time with the crutches, slurring my speech. And it went great. But by the time it got back to them, they had cast RJ, and he was,
Gotcha.
he was local and all this stuff. And she was like, they really liked you. It just, it didn't work. So since then, I've now auditioned for Better Call Saul, I think 16 times.
Yeah.
So because she's trying, it's like, I think she feels bad. So she's like, we got to get you something.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I love RJ, and I was bitter. I wouldn't watch that show for the longest time. I was
Sure.
like, no, forget that guy. Like that was my
Yeah.
part. And then finally I watched it and I was like, dang it, this is my favorite show of all time.
Yeah.
So that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So RJ, I met RJ actually at a Comic-Con convention. I was doing like a kind of a sketch thing with like a bunch of the celebrities there, because like the guy that started the Comic-Con's a friend of mine. And so I got to meet him, and I got to do like this sketch with RJ, and he was just so cool.
Yeah.
Fast forward a few years later, I was cast in a kind of like a Sundance pilot,
Mhm.
and it was actually for deaf people, and I had a very small scene, but RJ was in it. And
Wow.
and so I went up to RJ. I'm like, dude, do you remember me? And like he totally remembered me. And he's like, oh my gosh. He's like, dude, I haven't seen you in forever. And we ended up having like this awesome conversation. And I just remember thinking, like, here's a guy that's like, he just owned who he is. And I feel like you're
Yeah.
doing the exact same thing. And I think that's the beautiful blessing. I really feel like God gives everyone, is like the ability to take whatever they have and use their voice and create their own path. And like, gosh, man, I mean, here's the interesting thing. I've known about The Chosen for a long time, because I was doing my kids show around the time that The Shepherd was barely even being finished. It wasn't even
Right.
finished. And so I'm friends with the Angel Studio guys since like 2017. And I heard about The Shepherd. Dallas hadn't really done much in the public eye. He had done a couple of things, but they were like, hey, we have some pretty strong belief in the show.
Mhm.
We think it's going to do well. And I was actually having a conversation after they'd finished the first 4 episodes. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I am a part of a company that did the visual effects for The Chosen.
I think you
So
mentioned that when
yeah,
we were shooting our
so when we were
scene. Yeah.
shooting, right? So I got to see all your faces and everything like that. And I had a conversation with Jonathan Rumi at NRB, and he was like, he's just, Jonathan, he's like a very nice guy, very humble guy. And he was like, I really hope that this show will do well,
Mhm.
and at the time, uh, the Chosen had a very, very small booth, like a little small room in this California theater. And there was like this other big show, Christian show, that was like taking first stage. And it was just like so big. And the Chosen was like this small, small thing. But I remember having this conversation with him, and I said, dude, I really think it will. Like, I think once enough people see it, like
Yeah.
it's going to touch people's hearts in a massive way. And like the way Dallas has crafted the characters, and like their tenderness and their realism and like their insecurities, and they're wanting to be apostles and serve the Lord, but they themselves are feeling weak and sad inside at
And
times,
human.
and
Yeah.
human, so
Yeah.
human. It makes it so relatable. And so I just love the fact that like you're able to use this character as a platform to empower people, man. I mean, that is just so huge and so amazing. And the fact that even though it was hard at the time to go through all the shame that you did go through, the
Yeah.
fact that you're able to kind of come out on the other side, now you can be a voice of hope and a voice of reason to a lot of people that feel like I can really relate to little James,
Right.
and I can really feel like my own insecurity, because your insecurity, your shame represents so many different things to so many different people.
Yeah.
But in you, it's kind of physically manifest so they can see that. But
Right.
in them, they could be like, but my shame is I feel dumb in school. I feel like I can't progress, or I can't do this. So I just think
Yeah.
it's so massive, man. So congrats to you. Like, I think that's just
Thank
such
you.
a huge thing. um I want to talk a little bit about like just working on the show itself. Like,
Mhm.
have you seen any miracles for yourself, like just being a part of this production?
Honestly, the entire concept of The Chosen is kind of a miracle. It's
Yeah.
the the fact that they raised $10 million off of this little short to make
Yeah.
season one, and then for season two, having a budget of almost $2 million an episode and raising that in the
Yeah.
middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
And then and none of us, like, the way we were all tested several times a week and we're in a bubble, but it's like there are 200 people on set every day. Sometimes, like when we did Sermon on the Mount, there were thousands of people on set.
Yeah.
um, but it's like there was never an issue, there was never an outbreak. um, it was very like just the logistics of all of it's kind of crazy when you really sit and think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's been some really crazy moments, like on so episode one, I'm not going to say too much for anyone who hasn't seen it, but there's have you seen episode one of season two?
I have.
So the opening sequence,
Mm-hmm.
where you're seeing a bunch of apostles and they're talking, and that's all I'm gonna say. But
Yep.
they it's an emotional sequence, and that whole day was it's all shot in this room. And as we were all going in there to do the all of these quick little scenes, there was just like this, as soon as you step foot in that room, it's just like this heaviness, and you're just like, whew, like all the air is like sucked out, and it's like
Mm.
still. And it was like, I got chills just now talking about it. It was one of the most surreal feelings, I can't even describe it, I've ever had on set. um, and getting to go through it with that group of people, like it was just so special. And then that was more just about like uh, uh, the because we're talking about some heavy stuff too. So it's like
Yeah.
just putting yourself in that situation, being with this group of people, imagining what it would be like to go through all of that. It was just so powerful. But then like there's all sorts of like things that have happened on set, like in episode two, I mentioned we have this long 15-minute tracking shot, and for
Mm-hmm.
people that aren't in the industry, that's like super uh
Challenging to do.
challenging. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and ambitious. And unless you're Alejandro Inarritu or Martin Scorsese or something, it's like most people don't try that, because it takes a lot of
Yes.
choreographing. And also the operators of those steady cams, it's like you have to have a lot of stamina and a lot of strength, because
Yeah.
those things get heavy fast. And he
And it's like if one mess up and you're like, all right, back to one, guy, start
yeah,
over, right?
yeah. And we rehearsed all morning into the like early afternoon. We started shooting, and just little things were happening. Like the camera would turn away from someone when it wasn't supposed to. The cameraman would need a break because he just literally couldn't, his
Yeah.
legs couldn't hold him. And finally, Dallas told this story last night as well, in the live stream. Finally, towards the end of the day, we had like a 20-minute window to get this shot because the sun was going down, and we had this 20-minute window. We had already moved a lot of stuff back because of weather and all this stuff. So we were already behind schedule. Um, and there was like this tiny window before it was totally dark outside. And Dallas was like, okay, let's try it. Like, let's knock it out and let's just hurry. So we all went back to one. We started, and within the first 30 seconds, one of the actors flubbed a line. So he's like, okay, back to one, hurry. We started again, and the exact same thing happened. So then we literally had exactly the amount of time we needed to get through the scene. So there could be no more mess ups. So we went back to one. We had 15 minutes to get through the scene, which is exactly how long the scene is. We start and we're going through, and it's like getting closer, and that's the scene I have where I'm talking to Joey Vahidi, who plays Thomas. And by the time it gets to me and Joey, it's towards the end of the scene. And a lot of the other takes we had to cut before then, or during, or whatever. So
You couldn't even get to your part.
Yeah. So we're doing our scene, and then we get through that, and then we get up, and the final part of the scene is a group of us standing in a circle talking. So when we get up and we get in the circle, you can kind of feel everyone like looking at each other, like, are we about to get through this?
Yeah.
And we did. And right as Dallas said, cut, the sun set, and it was dark right then. So, and the immediate scene after is a dinner scene, like around the fire. So you literally are watching this scene and watching the sunset in real time. And then the next scene is a dinner scene. So all day there's all this stress. We're trying to get through it. And finally, the only take that we could use was the perfect take. So there's a lot of stuff like that happens on this set where you're just like, that I would say, like, I can't believe it, but it's like now with this show, it's like the number of people that have watched it, like everything about it, it's number 4 on iTunes, like all this stuff is I'm not surprised by it anymore. So it's
amazing. Hundreds of millions of people have watched it and have been inspired by it. I mean, I just think like even me getting on that show was just like such a crazy thing, you know, like, and like how that all kind of came down, you know.
Right.
But I'll tell you, it's just so interesting to see like how many things happen. And I'll tell you what, tracking shots are hard. Like long, like one take shots are hard, but a 15-minute one, that's so difficult. And so to be able to pull that off and to make it what it is that's a miracle, man. That's so awesome. So I want to just kind of wrap things up, but ask you a couple more questions. First off, right now, what brings you joy?
My kids, my family, my wife, like just being home with my wife and kids and getting to play with them. Because right now, before I was doing marketing, I was in an office between seasons of The Chosen. But now I'm just kind of doing some freelance like videography work and acting and just kind of doing that. So that's been really nice, just being able to be home with the kids more. And because that's the hardest part about, working whenever I was working the 9-to-5 job and then going and doing acting stuff. It was taking a lot of time away. Sure. So that's been really nice. So that brings me a lot of joy. And then the art of like just creating art, whether it's, taking a picture or acting or writing, or I do a lot of screenwriting. Just doing that is very, very fulfilling. And then, watching movies. I am an avid Blu-ray collector. I have 1,500 over 1,500 Blu-rays, which is
no way. That's
nuts.
Amazing.
Yeah. But that kind of stuff. Going outside, exploring, just being in nature. That's yeah, those are all the things that make me happy.
No, I love that, man. It's funny, like this wall back here, this is my entire, this whole wall. You can't actually see it, but the whole thing is covered by movies when I put my projector on. Like the projector
Nice.
covered the whole thing, and I just sit in my bedroom and watch movies. It's amazing. I'm like, dude, I'm
Yeah.
immersed in this world. It's awesome. No, I love that, man, and I love, like, connecting, that fact you're able to connect with your family and all those
Yeah.
things right now. It's awesome. It's so great. Um, okay, what is your greatest fear?
Okay, so it's funny you said this. I actually talked about this with some of my castmates
Mhm.
when we were in Utah. We were just hanging out and we were asking each other that. And some people it's like, oh, sharks or
Sure.
death or whatever. But mine, the more I thought about it, I was like, I think my biggest fear is one, not being good enough, just in any facet, like whether it's acting, being as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, as a person, not being good enough or not being worthy. And then another of my biggest fears is because back to not being good enough, I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not, because I've done that plenty of times.
Sure.
But if I do something and it's not, if I myself am not good enough to reach that challenge, that's scary. That thought is scary. um and this season I had that fear on several scenes. There were some big scenes, including the big tracking shot, my scene there.
Hmm.
There were several moments where I'm like, am I good enough to do that? Am I going to be able to pull that off? And now seeing those, it's given me a lot of, like, I can kind of breathe and I'm like, okay, good.
Yeah.
I feel good with how it turned out. But that, and then being forgotten is a big one. And
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Yeah.
yeah, I think just being forgotten, not leaving an impact. I want to, with my work and with not just acting, but going out and charity work and working with foundations and talking to kids and stuff like that. Whatever it is that I do in life, I want to leave some sort of mark. And yeah, if, I feel like if I'm forgotten, then I didn't leave a big enough impact. So those are probably
Hmm.
my biggest fears.
That's interesting, man. I like that, and it is. It's like it's a thing that, like, kind of urges you every day, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I look at my life and it's just full of so many blessings. I would say, just like miracles and blessings, and I feel very similarly. Like, if I don't, sometimes I go a little too crazy because I'm trying to do too many things at the same time. But
Yeah.
honestly, like, if I don't feel like I've really, like, helped people out or lifted someone up, that worries me. That terrifies me.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, oh man, like, what more could I have done? Um, Very sadly, a friend of mine who so I did this movie right before we did The Chosen. I was telling you guys about this film I was working on, and one of the people on that show, he was helping us produce it. Very sadly, he took his life like a couple
Oh,
weeks ago.
wow.
It was
Wow.
very
I'm sorry
sad,
to hear
and
that.
it's okay. And it's interesting because, like, you go very introspective very quickly, and you're like,
Hmm.
wait, what could I have done? What more could I have? In fact, the last time he texted me, I actually came and visited you guys on the Sermon on the Mount. And
Hmm.
because I was so busy, I didn't really get a chance to, like, respond back to him in the way I wish I would have.
Yeah.
Um, and it makes me think a lot, like, could I have done more? Could I have, like, been more? And it's interesting because everyone thinks that,
Hmm.
everyone, like, I've talked to that knew him was like, yeah, I wish I spent more time with him here and did this there. But it always kind of makes you realize, hey, life is very precious and it's also very fragile, and it's just it's a beautiful thing. And if you can do good work and make someone feel loved in some
Yeah.
capacity, then that's a beautiful life. And I feel like you're doing that already. Like, you've got, like, like your path that you're on right now, and playing this character that you're playing. I'm very excited to check out episode 3 now, or 2, whichever one it was. But I'm very excited to see the the impact, not just little James has with the apostles in the show, but what Jordan has with the world, because
Thank you.
because of like what you've been given, which the gifts that you've been given. So last question to wrap it up. What would you tell your younger self?
Let's see. I would probably tell my younger self that going back to like what my fears and insecurities are, that you are good enough, that you are enough, and just to remind myself that you've been given, because I wouldn't want to tell myself anything to avoid the bullying or the rejection or the failures, because I think all of that is important. I think that kind of made me who I am. But maybe just to kind of have the confidence in the back of my head of like, it's gonna be worth it. You're gonna come out on the other side. And my favorite quote is Tom Hanks says it a lot. It's "This too shall pass," and I think that just to kind of sum it up is what I would say is like, no matter what you're going through, whether it's good or bad, it's going to pass, and you're going to go on to another chapter. So I think that's what I would probably tell my younger self.
It's amazing, man. It's great. It's fantastic. And I love that because it helps you realize life is ever evolving, right? And at the same time, there are things you can do to have joy with the evolvement of life.
Yeah.
So I love that you were able to like find the joy for yourself and also be a light into the world, man, and like share your light and gifts with others. So thank you for your work, not just in The Chosen, but in life, which is awesome.
Thank you. Thank you too. Like you're doing some really cool stuff. I watched the trailer for your show. It looks really fun. So yeah,
it's gonna be fun. It's interesting because it's like very high energy, very high energy, and it's interesting because I played a lot of different characters, but it's fun to comically play an alpha male. Just because like that's just not who I typically play, right?
Yeah, same.
It was a lot of fun. So anyway. Yeah, thank you so much, Jordan. I really appreciate you taking the time, and good luck in your future endeavors.
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks so much for listening to the Lemonade Stand podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use to be alerted when we release new episodes. We'd also love to hear your feedback in the reviews, and if you or someone you know has an awesome Lemonade Stand story, please reach out to us on social media and let us know. Thanks so much and have a great day.